terrific to be in front of a group of people that can remember things like, well, when going to the moon was thought of as futuristic rather than something people used to do in ancient times. Yeah, or can remember when we had something called the Cold War, when we actually, Americans were told that we had to fight the Soviet Union because they did horrible, evil things like invade other countries unprovoked, or torture people, or spy on their citizens' own private conversations. Wow. Now, of course, that's the United States of America. Something's happened in those few years, and thinking back, I also remember a general feeling, and there's senses of life that one can't capture by picking up a book and reading back about it necessarily, maybe by listening to the music or watching the film, but still you're not getting the whole experience, unless you've been there. And it's that there used to be, even in a difficult time, even in the midst of like the Vietnam War going on, there was a feeling of progress, that somehow we were all moving to some greater state of being, that there was hope for the future, that and that progress almost seemed inevitable, unstoppable. That's gone. And then I think about what kind of things changed back then. And I didn't know about it, but something I was almost completely unaware of that did happen around the time that the change gradually started changing over from a sense of progress to a sense of ever-growing despair and hopelessness to the present situation. Really, one thing that I think may have been a starting initiative was the removal of the gold standard. And it seems like an esoteric academic point, but what's happened since then, when you look at the economy and how confident people are about things. Now, as a libertarian, I'm not for a lot, I'm very much against a lot of government spending on things. But even if I was for it, I'd like the money, if I was for it, I'd be for the money that the government spent being worth something. That we could actually give people something with that money, if indeed, or I mean, I actually don't believe the government gives. We could take away something that's worth something and give it to people that the government would feel was more deserving. But we don't even have, the money itself isn't worth anything. No economy is sustainable given the way we're going now, be it capitalist or socialist or whatever. The reason, for instance, like, I'm not for a lot of big government spending, in fact, I'm very much against it, but the reason they can support something like sending people to the moon back then from scratch, now they're talking about doing it in the same amount of time, having all the body of knowledge for, is because there was all this wealth around that was quickly available, and that's when people realized, well, gee, we could use this wealth to help all these people that have these programs. But the wealth is now depleted by the fact that the money isn't backed by anything. We've been building on faith for all these years. $1 now, you need 28 of those dollars to buy what $1 back then bought. The price of gas hasn't even gone up since 1972. If you bought it in gold, it would be the same price. What you're doing is your money's being taken away. So picture this now. Let's say you're saving your money. Let's say you have quadrupled the amount of money you saved since 1972 versus what you got now. Well, you'd actually have to 28-fold the amount of money you put in the bank in 72 to break even now. So your savings has been robbed from you by this Federal Reserve System that has not been audited. By the way, it's not federal and it's not a reserve. So that's one thing. Another thing about voting third party in general, I wish to bring up, you got basically a couple of the McCain-Obama bills that made it through the Senate. And it's kind of good they're both in the Senate, so they get to both vote on the same bills, and you can look at what they did. They both supported in listening to your phone calls and reading your emails. They think that's a good thing for the government to be doing. They both voted in favor of it. Not only the government listening to your phone calls and reading your emails. Now, of course, when we talked about the Cold War, they didn't have emails to read, but we think how evil the Russians would listen to phone calls. They both also voted in favor of support of continuing to fund the war in Iraq. One saying he's against it, but I'll vote for funding it anyway, and the other person more consistently saying, I'm for the war in Iraq and I'm voting for funding it. They both have voted for taking 700 billion of your dollars and just handing it over to Wall Street bankers. You know, it's like Robin Hood in reverse on steroids. But they both, and how do they think they're getting reelected? And you know what, they're right, they are getting reelected. How does that? Because they're assuming that all they have to do to get reelected is to prove that the other politician was worse. That's all they got to prove, sorry. Yeah. But all you do is prove the other one's worse. So, you know, everyone's like, well, you know, we saw Bush going into Iraq doing all these things, and Bush is, you know, Bush this, Bush that, so we're voting for Obama. But he's voting for the same things that McCain is voting for in the Senate most of the time. And then you have, and then back in 2006, the Democrats swept through Congress because there was this belief that they were going to get the troops out of Iraq. What have they done? They've continued to keep them there. Now, you might say, well, they can't do that without, you know, being able to override the president. Wrong. Funding a war does not require a 2/3 override. All it requires is a failure to vote for a simple majority to fund the war. So, but everyone's going to go there, and they're going to vote for Republicans or Democrats, depending on who got them more mad. They'll vote for the other one. And the game continues. So as far as any of us third-party candidates, I'd really say the only way you're going to get any real change happening is to vote for a third party. Now, as a libertarian, libertarians generally don't trust the government. We don't trust them with our money or our private business. I know many, I did go and visit the Great Panthers page, and I do know a lot of you do trust the government with your money. But let me do add that the money that you're going to be trusting them with isn't worth much. So I guess it's not really that much harm done. I would support a full audit of the Federal Reserve System. And ultimately return to the gold standard. Now, it may be hard to engineer that with a big bureaucracy, but the least we could do is allow for private competing currencies. There are people who actually sold coins called Liberty Dollars. They got busted by the government for selling honest money that was worth something. I guess they were afraid that they might put paper fiat notes out of business or something. You know, we should at least allow that. To at least give people a chance that they could save something of value instead of saving a whole bunch of paper or digital information in a bank account and have it all go down to zero all of a sudden after they've worked all their life to put it there. That's basically what you're with now. The gold isn't going to evaporate. Silver isn't going to evaporate. You should at least have the option of backing up with something that's tangible. For the Democrats, you're saying you're happy with what they're doing, and you vote for Republicans, you're saying you're happy with what they're doing. Most of the time, they're doing the same thing. Basically, I'm saying vote Libertarian if you'd like to see less government intrusion in your life at all levels, especially as in my case, I'm running for a federal campaign, so especially if you want to see reduction in federal intervention in your private life, I'd say vote Libertarian. But at any level, we are for smaller government.